I got nightmares in my head, I fear thoughts build up until I can't hear. My mind fills up into a creature, and it haunts me somewhere much deeper. I got nightmares in my head, I fear.
Hello and welcome to True Crime Rocket Science, the most authentic voice in true crime. The local authorities in Tenerife searched for Jay day in and day out for 13 straight days. Now, although the British media widely reported on Mark Williams Thomas's arrival in Tenerife, no one seems to know that he left and that he's back in the UK. He is back, isn't he? In his post on X, in the very last minute, he said, "Here in the UK," which suggests he's no longer in Tenerife. I must say the wooden oars in the background behind him certainly made me think he was still on the island at a lodge of some kind. One TikToker seems to have gotten into a spat with a family over money and is now withdrawing from the search. And so how is the private search for Jay going? I think the family said, we need experts on site, not hikers or something like that. So the Team GB private search doesn't seem to be doing terribly well and doesn't seem terribly well organized, certainly at this point, compared to the original search. If you put the Spanish search side by side with what has happened so far on the other side, how do they compare, would you say? Now, the TikTok hero who criticized the Spanish cops on what would turn out to be the last day of the search, to his credit, he is still in Tenerife and still searching. I have my own thoughts on the most sensible strategy to search for Jay, but for this analysis, I want to talk about all the ransom demands that came in. Before we get to that, if you haven't subscribed to the channel, please do. Welcome to the many of you who have subscribed. Happy Independence Day to those folks tuning in from America, and also our thoughts are with those in Britain who have cast their votes. Hopefully there'll be a good outcome in that regard. Just a reminder that from next week, I'll be covering the Alec Baldwin trial, so look out for that. If you're enjoying this analysis, if you've enjoyed this series of coverage, and more important, if you'd like me to continue, please show your enthusiasm in the comments. You can also hit the thanks button, and let's get started. So the foul play conversation no one is having in this case, or without just mentioning it, I'm talking about like going into what we're talking about, are the deliberate and cynical attempts by liars, frauds and thieves out there, not out there in Tenerife, out there in the ether, trying to steal Jay's family's GoFundMe cash. Basically, the people on this side kind of the keyboard, us out there in online land, right? Lots of, not just one person, there have been several attempts saying we have kidnapped Jay and we demand a ransom and etc. And they probably know that, there's almost £50,000 now in GoFundMe cash. But this whole thing that you are now going to go out there and cynically try to defraud the victim's family on top of what they're already going through, that's playing foul. That's foul play. That's actually criminal conduct right there. If you're looking for foul play, here it is. It's so ironic, this effort to find Jay warped into a foul play bonanza by a bunch of money-grubbing social media opportunists. And then you have the fake feeding frenzy. It's so evident, so obvious, so obnoxious in this case, even the New York Times. They all the way across the pond from Tenerife, they've been quietly and carefully observing how things are playing out. Now, beyond the ridiculous fake ransom note demands, the New York Times refers to the following, quote, "Unconfirmed reports of Jay being spotted were joined by another increasingly common feature of disappearances, online sleuths who are certain they can do what the police have not yet done and solve the case." Well, have they? There's a small minority that believes and engages with these things, said Alexandra Sikocha, a professor of political psychology at the University of Kent. I don't know if I've got her surname right, but she goes on to say, but they can be really disturbing to the family and the whole process of the investigation. Now, obviously, you've heard this being discussed, but I think we need to go into it in a lot more detail. What is actually going on in terms of the psychology? How are people thinking about all of this? Why do people gravitate to conspiracies? Also, I'm not sure if it's that small, judging from the comments on my own channel. I mean, the people who believe and engage in conspiracies. And based on the poll I did, fully 1/3 seem to think that foul play makes the most sense here, including apparently Jay's family and friends. Now, obviously, believing in foul play, we don't actually know for sure the outcome of this case, but believing in foul play doesn't make it a conspiracy. It does come fairly close, though, in some instances, some of the scenarios that have been put forward. But in general, just believing in foul play it does come fairly close to a conspiracy, because logic and the evidence clearly points us in the other way. Based on what we know, logic and the evidence points us in the other way. Now, I do think one level below the fake ransom demands, which is truly disgusting, are the conspiracy peddlers. Have you ever thought about the kind of people who believe in conspiracies? I'm sure all of us know someone who's particularly paranoid and given to to believing in ridiculous conspiracies. Have you ever thought, what kind of person does believe in conspiracies? What is the kind of common undercurrent of psychology that's taking place? Do they know that they are part of a particular group, and the people in that group or the members in that group are all similar in a certain way? Besides being more susceptible to conspiracies, no matter what they are more susceptible to conspiracies in general than another group. Why is that? What's going on with these folks? Now, according to the New York Times, conspiracies can and do generate a lot of attention and engagement. Sharing them, according to this professor, gives these people a sense that they're creating order in a chaotic situation, even if they have no real involvement. And if you think about this case, did the conspiracies create order? Or did it actually lead to the police complaining, the family complaining, some news reporters complaining, a lot of people complaining? It wasn't actually creating order, it was creating disorder. It wasn't resolving a chaotic situation, it was creating more chaos. And I'd like to ask, I don't know if you're willing to go there, were you part of that, creating this disorder? And so she goes on to make a really extraordinary comment. She says, this whole thing of believing in conspiracies is a coping mechanism. So you believing in conspiracy is actually something separate that's going on, where you are dealing with some of your own issues. And it's a coping mechanism that helps people deal with an unmanageable reality. She goes on to say, in the grand scheme, the small number of people who are creating and sharing these theories is often small. I would disagree with that. I think in the grand scheme, the number of people who are doing this is becoming, it's almost mainstream these days. If you look at how countries are split down the middle, one half believing in conspiracies, the other half, the speed at which this spreads means that it has immense influence. And then when the damage is done, when it turns out it was a conspiracy, people have already moved on to the next one. I think YouTubers are playing a big role in making this whole thing very, very widespread. And they know how to take advantage of it. They know it's a flaw in a lot of people's thinking and reasoning, and they are taking advantage. Now, I think the reason people think spreading conspiracies creates order is because conspiracies so people think that spreading these conspiracies creates order, that they think they are putting the gospel essentially out into the world. And I think the reason that they think this is because conspiracies tend to be simple and easy explanations. It's often a meme, it's often a witty statement, it's often some kind of snarky jab at someone, right? And it's a simple and easy explanation, and it tends to be with regard to dealing with the unknown. And when it comes to the unknown, we feel uneasy. And when we feel uneasy about the unknown, this creates existential anxiety. So it just takes a blowhard out there telling us in full bluster and bullshit mode, give us a nice little nugget, and then you confidently and indignantly provide this simple answer. But what is actually going on is you're addressing other issues in people's hearts and minds, their own anxiety, their own difficulties dealing with their own worlds. And the trouble with conspiracies is that they're always too simple and too easy. Life is never that simple. Life is never that black and white. The best ones come along when law enforcement and the media and the public are reaching out for answers, but none come. We just don't know. Conspiracies handily solve that impasse just like that. They instantly invent one. Job done, anxiety gone. In the Titan submersible case, someone came up with the call logs and the call transcripts of the Titan. And everybody loved that, except it was fake. I do think that the folks who habitually gravitate to conspiracies might want to look carefully at the professor of political psychology at the University of Kent, Alexandra Shikokcha, her thoughts on where this is coming from. What is going on in people's hearts and minds? Again, just to repeat, she says it's a coping mechanism. So if you are gravitating to conspiracies, it's not because you really have thought about it or you've worked it out. It's a sign that you're trying to cope. It's a sign that in other areas of your life that you're trying to cope with reality and perhaps failing to cope with reality. It's also a sign that you need help dealing with what feels like an unmanageable reality. And let's be fair, reality is unmanageable. If you take all of it on, it's overwhelming. That's a fact. A lot of us do need help, but you shouldn't then, in the effort to get help, cheat your way to sorting it out. And I mean, what the professor suggests clearly is that people do need help dealing with reality, and they do so. I'm talking about those who deal in conspiracies. They do so by cheating. They do so by lying to themselves and each other. That's essentially what it is. And you will see a pattern in some conspiracies. For example, if there's an unknown scenario that potentially enhances fear, say like climate change or the war in Ukraine, the most popular conspiracy will minimize the whole thing and suggest either that it isn't happening to begin with or that if it is, it's not our problem. Awesome. Sorted out. Job done. Anxiety gone. Simple, easy. And unfortunately, that's too easy. That's not how it works. On the other hand, if the anxiety aspect is less existential and it's more about the problem of anxiety, for example, we don't know what happened to Jay. It's sort of somewhat separated from ourselves and our own situation. Well, then the conspiracy that people turn to typically is scapegoating. Who did this? Whose fault is it? Can't find Jay? Well, blame drug dealers or foreigners or blame the foreign police. Can't find Nicola Bully? Blame her partner, blame a dog walker, blame anyone and blame everyone. But for pity's sake, don't imagine Nicola had an accident, because that brings the existential terror rushing back with a vengeance. Make no mistake, we live in a world where people treat reality like a convenience store. That only works until a point, because reality has a nasty way of persisting, regardless of one's attempt to avoid it. Someone once said, reality is like gravity. Even if you don't believe in it, reality believes in you and is going to affect itself on the people who believe in it and don't believe in it, regardless. The unmanageable reality in this case, in terms of Jay SLATER, is our sense of our preeminence over nature is being challenged. Just like human endeavors in the face of a Category 5 hurricane are revealed to be puny when pitted against the might and fury of nature, when nature is fully unleashed, a person is not terribly powerful, is he or she? On CNN, I saw someone reporting on storm damage, I think in Jamaica, where there was a beautiful wrecked yacht in the background named Persistence, tossed ashore in the background. When you look at that, you realize we are not the immortal, untouchable gods of this earth we imagine ourselves to be. So what is the way to deal with unmanageable reality? Well, it's firstly to accept that it can be unmanageable and often is overwhelming. Secondly, and you might want to write this down, so the first thing is to accept that unmanageable reality is a reality. It is difficult. Secondly, to allow oneself to only take on pieces of it at a time. If taking on all of it is getting a bit too much for you, if you're watching all the news, try and cut down. Deal with the parts that you can be effective on. Think about effectively and also be effective beyond that. And know that when you're starting to feel seriously affected by it. Thirdly, don't allow oneself to simply accept what we want to think or what makes us feel better. That's narcissism. And in a world like that, if everyone's doing that, then if we have a world where people hide away from reality in fictions and fantasies, and it just makes them, it feeds on their narcissism, feeds on their sense that this doesn't affect me. Well, the reality out there is going to become a nightmare. If everyone is hiding away from reality, escaping reality, distracting themselves from reality, well, then reality itself is going to become a nightmare. Ultimately, a colossal wolf knocking at your bedroom door. Finally, I think the way we deal with unmanageable reality is take action. The only way to deal with the real world is in the real world, not in our heads, not in our hearts, but by actually stepping out the door and doing something. What is that? I don't know. Speak up, oppose in some way, counterfeit narratives in some way, or at the very least tune them out, filter them out, or turn them off. But you can also think of a practical, real-world way that you can be part of the solution beyond a repost or a like. I mean, doing something real in the real world, that is actually going to make the world a better place. Doing something constructive, an action, not a thought or a click. It could even mean clearing your mind. I mean, the first step might just be clear your mind, go for a walk, and find yourself, bring yourself back to the real world. Because we really do need soldiers of reality right now, and this channel is that. We fight for the authentic narrative. We fight for what really happened. Nothing more. Where does the evidence take us? What really happened? What is reality here? Who's the real person in the situation? That's all we're doing. And it is a fight because so many people are distorting, manipulating, exaggerating, changing it in some way to suit themselves, to suit their agenda. What about giving reality its due? What is reality? That's what this channel is all about. That's why there's this focus on authenticity. Doesn't matter if we don't know what the real world is. Doesn't matter if we don't understand who we are or who somebody else is. If we elect a leader and we can't see that they aren't who they say who they are. We need soldiers of reality right now. We're living in a largely make-believe world, and the stakes right now are higher than ever. A single self-aware, conscious, critical thinker is a huge asset. A huge asset. A vital person vitalizes, and a vital community, which we're trying to create here on this channel, a vital community can energize the world out of its collective magical thinking myopia. I hope you guys will be part of that. Maybe another reason to think of subscribing to this channel. I'm not going to take it further than that. Thank you for listening, and I'll see you guys next time.